Welcome back, everybody, to the Attract and Stand Out podcast. I am so thrilled to have today's guest with me today. It is Leisa Peterson. She is a Sedona-based author, a business growth strategist, money expert, mindset coach, and podcaster. She's an internationally recognized authority on bridging the gap between financial freedom and human spiritual potential. She has a unique ability to draw from biology, neuroscience, psychology, and spiritual teachings, as well as psychology, to create a synthesis of knowledge that helps people understand scarcity and prosperity in a profounding, effective way. She's had the greatest fortune of witnessing thousands of money breakthroughs and financial healings as a result of the process that she explores in her book, The Mindful Millionaire. Please help me welcome to the show, Leisa Peterson.
Hello, Darlene, and everyone watching and listening.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. I am thrilled to have you here, like I had said, because I know this is such an important conversation to have. So many of my clients and people that I connect with just in the online world, we're always talking about our mindset and our money mindset and how there's so many things that we as entrepreneurs have to overcome so that we can be in the right place, so that we can work our businesses and show up as our unique, authentic selves. So I'm thrilled to dive in today and just hear your story and learn a little bit more about you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's start there. I would love to hear just like some of the backstory. What was it that called you into starting your own business and really switching? Because I believe I read that you started in the financial industry, like you were talking money to all kinds of people, but then you transitioned into kind of doing it on your own and coming up with your own unique foundation for it.
Yeah, I was actually an executive in a large bank for several years, and then I walked away from that, became a mortgage banker, eventually a financial advisor. And what I can say is having come from that very left brain, linear, this is how you do it. It's all about the, money. I was drawn to working one-on-one with folks, both in the mortgage banking and then later in the financial advising. And I started to notice that when the economy isn't working, we have data, we have charts, we have graphs, we know what's not working, where are the blocks and what needs to change. And yet, as a human being, when things are blocked and not in flow and not working very well, we had no way of knowing what the heck was going on. And I got really curious about that. And I wanted to find out if there was a way that we could actually tell what was happening for us from an energy standpoint in our relationship with money, but it really applies to everything in life. I just happen to use money as the metaphor for like, where are the blocks and how can we find them? And what happens when we figure out how to let go of things that are holding us back and move into our greatest potential?
Yeah, I love that. And it's so important to find like what those blocks are, right? Especially when it comes to our money mindset, because I know for myself, like sometimes it's like the generational blocks or like things that we've heard our grandparents and our parents say to us. But then there's also deeper stuff that can come up for us as well, depending on, what our background is and what our story is and like what experiences we've gone through. Like all those things kind of like almost snowball together when it comes to the things that, get in our heads, the stories that we tell ourselves and how we show up.
Yeah, it's so true. And they stay with us until we actually, have some kind of breakthrough. And I wasn't even sure that people could change at first. I mean, I'll be honest, because when you're just working in the financial services business, people show up and they already have their stories. It's already playing out. And I wasn't sure that things could actually change for people by changing their mindset. And that was what got me so curious is, okay, well, what happens? Like, could we actually change it? I've always been really focused on money because I didn't have any when I was growing up. And I decided early in life that I wanted to have a lot of it. And I kind of went and got my MBA, and my parents hadn't even finished barely high school. And I just became really consumed by my opportunities. But most people aren't like me. Most people tend to be pretty similar to like wherever they came from. So if you came from wealth, you tend to figure out how to create wealth for yourself. If you come from nothing, there's an idea that maybe debt is just part of life and you're never going to get out of debt, which would have been my family. And I broke that cycle. So I knew that it was possible. And the more, I leaned into that, it was like, well, why was I so different?
Yeah. So why do you think that you were able to break that cycle then? Like, what do you think growing up without having as much, what was it about that situation that allowed you to shift so easily to be okay with bringing in that money and like calling it in?
Yeah. I mean, I've thought a lot about this because of my coaching business and then especially writing my book. It was like, okay, what was happening? And part of my journey is different than maybe a lot of other people's journeys where I had a lot of human like tragedy, family events occur starting 21 years ago. And at that time I was at the like top of my career. I had worked really hard to get there. And what I did was I kept everything looking the way that it did. I kept my job, I kept working, but inside I collapsed. I just literally was like, I don't even know the meaning of life. I have basically sacrificed everything to get ahead. I have made money, but at what cost? I don't even know who I am. And I'm really, really unhappy. So the person I do know is really unhappy. And so what I did isn't necessarily what I recommend for other people to do. You know, to make money your God is not a good option. I think that seems obvious to most of us now, but I
Yeah.
didn't know that earlier in life. And so I went back to say, well, what choices did I make along the way that I could have still had the money, but I wasn't sacrificing my soul in the process of it? Because I don't think it's about not having any money. Like, that's not what I teach. I mean, my book is about, my journey of becoming a millionaire and also realizing that there had to be a lot more to life and there could be different choices that we make along the way that allow us to have the money, the comfort that comes with the money, and the decrease in stress that comes with the money. But then we also have this incredible life that we're building, and we're not sacrificing ourselves like I was.
Yeah. And it's a lot, right? Like you're like you said, you're sacrificing so much of your life because we're trained like you need to have money so that you can have all these things. And I had a career like that too when I was in retail management, where I was working 60 plus hours a week, and I was working for that paycheck, right? Like I was hustling, and it came to a point where I was like, no, this is not what I want. Like this, like I was sacrificing so much at home with my son, and I was working all these hours that I had like all the mom guilt because I wasn't home with him. And then when I was at home with him, when I should have been having like great quality time because of the high demand stress of my job, I was worried about what was happening at work when I was there. So there was never like a good balance between the two. And I think that's a big struggle that I see so many people have is like, well, we have to work, we have to make money, but how do we like live our lives in a way that feel really good and authentic to who we are too?
Yeah, it's each person I think has to figure it out for themselves, but coaches, books, and different tools and videos, I think there's a lot of ways to give us perspective. And we have our personal tendencies. Like, I like to work. I like to work a lot. Like, I just,
Yeah.
but what I'm doing when I work, now that is what really makes a difference in my life. If I'm doing this kind of stuff, I'm celebrating it and I love helping people. But in my jobs before, I just felt like, I couldn't be myself in any situation. I was always just kind of putting a fake mask on. And after a while, that wears itself out.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because you're putting on that mask, right? And you're stressing yourself out trying to be somebody who you're not even like it's not you. Like you're not showing up as your true self. You're not having any fun. It sucks that joy out of you when you're trying to be someone else. But then when we are able to step away and start our own businesses and like kind of start stepping into who we actually are, like it's like almost like a relief, and that like mask falls off and your body just is more light and flowy. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but you're just like you're more in zen with yourself, and it just feels so much better than like that weight that I know I felt in my career before. So
Yeah, it's so amazing, I think, to be self-employed, feel comfortable showing up as the person that you really feel like you are, and not all that second guessing and negative self-talk that I think used to happen for me a lot.
yeah, absolutely. So what would you say then, like you've had your business for a while now, what have been some of like the biggest things that you've been able to accomplish with your business, and how you've shown up differently since kind of shedding that old skin and stepping into the like new chapter?
Yeah, I think the process of writing the book and compiling a framework to give people a different way of thinking about money has been one of my greatest joys. Like, I am more on the shy side. I will not be the person typically at a party that you will see talking, everyone's ears off. Like maybe if we're in a deep conversation, then watch out. But sharing my ideas and my opinions with the world is not where I came from. Like that is not by nature something I felt comfortable doing. And so the idea that I would be given the opportunity to share and have a professionally published book in this way, like I still am trying to understand how much that means to me, not
Yeah.
just because personal, this outside validation is so important, but just like I stepped into that. I wanted it really bad and that I was able to create it for myself. And more important than that was the fact that the reason you do all of that is so that you can have this book go out all over the world. And I get emails from people in like Taiwan and Slovenia and Ireland and South America. And, you're just like, they're reading the book and they're writing to me. And they're like, I'm on my third reading of the book. And you just think, is this really happening? Like from where I came from, I didn't expect any of that. So the confidence that has come as part of just speaking my truth and being invited to share at this level is absolutely amazing.
Yeah. What has been some of the things that have been the hardest for you when it came to like sharing your voice and sharing your message with the world? Was there some struggles that came up with that, or fear gremlins that popped in your head during that process? Or
Yes, most definitely. Every step of the way, like there would be moments of just like, what are you thinking? You can't share this with other people. And even so much so, here we're in the fall of 2020. It's been quite an interesting year, to say the least. But in January, we were thinking that the book was going to come out in June. It ultimately, because of COVID, came out in July 2020. But in January, I started having massive anxiety attacks to the point where I thought about actually writing checks to the publisher to try and get the book rights back so that they couldn't publish it. Because I was like, the world is not ready for this book. It is not written for the average person out there, and I am going to be a laughing stock. Like they're gonna just skewer me. I can't even bear the thought of that. And my husband's like, calm down. And every night I put my head on the pillow and it's like, no, you don't understand. Like I shared stuff that nobody's gonna understand. They're gonna think I'm crazy. And I had to really work on that. It was like all the fears I had ever had about sharing my stuff came out
yeah,
in January. And then, COVID, we started getting news about COVID in February. And by March, I was like, holy crap, this book knew when it was supposed to come out, because the shift in consciousness that has happened around money and around the struggles of life have really started to change this year. And we're just now starting to understand those changes inside of us, because it's going to create a ripple that will affect the rest of our lives. And we're still just even seeing how this is going to play out in the economy and the different ways. It's not like I'm a doomsdayer, but it is changing the way we
yeah,
think about what we need and what is comfortable and what is extra and all kinds of stuff like that. And the book fits perfectly in those sorts of situations where change is happening, and we're trying to figure out, how does that change affect my life? And I think the book, people have said, it's coming out at this time where it's like, I need that, but I wouldn't have wanted it 6 months ago.
yeah. No, and it's like you birthed your book baby in the perfect timing for when the world was ready to like actually have that shift. Because I'd so agree with you. I know so many of us are looking at like everything in our life, like reevaluating what's important, what's not important. We're all setting like new boundaries for ourselves. I know for myself, like just looking at like my before life, before COVID, like I used like the weekends were filled with sports activities with the kids, and the work week is like busy between taking the kids to school and working and like coming home and having dinner and doing all the things. And I know that I've been able to prioritize a lot of things, and I've also like minimalized a lot of things as well. Like there's a lot of things that I've cut that I'm like, I hope that I'm really good at setting boundaries when things do open up in a bigger way again, so that I can feel the level of like quality time with my family and the joy that we're able to have. Like, even though there's been so many like hard things that have come out of this, I think so many families are able to really see what's important. And when it comes to money, like, where are we spending our money? What are we spending it on? Why are we doing all these like random little things that we're not maybe traveling, or we're like, where are we putting the money? Like, are we putting it in what actually brings us joy, or just what we think we need to have because we have like that keeping up with the Joneses, or like everybody else's kids are doing this, so I should be doing all these things with my kids. But then now it's like, oh, whew, like we can breathe again a little bit. At least I can. Like, it's not quite as busy. Not that life isn't still busy in like this new way, but it's really given me an opportunity to like see what matters and what's important and spend more time doing those things. I
Most
know,
definitely.
yeah, I know in the book you talk about scarcity and how to kind of overcome that. I'd love to hear just a little bit of what your thoughts are. Like, why do we, as humans, as especially as entrepreneurs, like, why do we have that scarcity mindset come up when it comes to money?
So one of the ways we can think about scarcity, it is a science. Like, I'm not just making it up. There's been a lot of research about what happens to us as it pertains to being in a scarcity mindset. And what that means is, in that moment, we feel like there isn't enough, and we make our decisions according to this idea there isn't enough. So some researchers at Harvard and Princeton figured out that when we're operating from that place, we have a decrease in IQ of 13 or 14 points, which is like losing one night's sleep. So if you imagine the stress that can happen for us when we're just like, there's not enough, and we keep repeating that, and then that's how it plays out. But the other thing that I have been bringing more and more into the work, and noticing how it affects us, is many people have heard of the term negative bias or negativity bias. And as human beings, we actually are wired to pay attention to the negative more than we are to the positive. The English language is actually written with more negative words than positive words. It's like fascinating. And there's been studies that say like 80% of the average human being's thoughts are negative versus positive. So what I have seen in 21 years of being a daily meditator is that that is who I was before. And when I started to meditate and have this daily practice and be involved in all this consciousness stuff and yoga and, holistic healing, I started noticing that I could change my way of being, the way I feel, the way I think, the way I show up in the world, going from a very negative person that had to hide that part of myself, because it's not like we know people don't want to hang out with us when we're negative, but maybe we present a really good face, but behind the scenes we're like, yeah, that's shit, and we're judging people and we're making all these assumptions of the worst, like that was me. And that was why I became so passionate about this work, because I was like, if I could change the percentage of times that I'm thinking negative thoughts to positive thoughts, then would my life look different? And sure enough, it does drastically. I built a whole business off of teaching people how to change what's going on in that, inner narrative. And when we do that, all of a sudden we're like, well, dang, there's actually a lot more possibility, because the other piece of scarcity is that it shrinks, it tunnels our vision. So we only see this tiny, circle of possibility of what we could do in any situation versus the whole landscape.
Yeah.
So prosperity says, there are like limitless solutions to your problem, not just one, but the small self, the scarcity mind says, you got one option. And if you don't figure this out, everything's going to fall apart.
Yeah. And it's so true. Like, we hold all these stories, and it's almost like little gremlins on our shoulders, like telling us all the things that could go wrong, all the negative thoughts, all the like judgy comments and all that stuff. But when you do focus on it and shift it around, like, you're right, it's almost like the light just like gets bigger, and you're like, oh, I can actually do this. I can actually move forward. I can do what I'm trying to do instead of letting it hold you back. What would you say is like the number one tip if somebody's listening right now and they're like, oh, that's me, like I'm so negative, or I have all those like negative gremlins in my head? What's one thing that would suggest to do to like slightly start to shift that perspective a little bit?
So we've already talked about meditation. So the other thing coming up is that, especially with money, the one thing we can do is actually start to talk to other people about our situation. talk about what's going on in our lives, move past the shame, move past the guilt, move past the regret, and talk to somebody, at least one person who is a good listener, who's not going to judge you, who's going to hold space for you. But I have seen dramatic changes in someone's life just from having a very simple conversation, which is, I got to tell the truth about some things I'm holding on to. And the truth shall set you free.
Yeah, I love that tip because in conversation, so much can come out that we might not even be aware of. Like as we start talking, like more and more things can come out. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I didn't even know I was thinking that. But because we had this conversation, like it opened your eyes to some of those things, like those blocks. Like that's what I love about coaching, I think the most is, and working with my clients, is like the more questions you ask, the more deeper you dig. And all of a sudden you're like, it's like that aha moment, just waiting to get out. So yeah, I would love to hear a little bit about chakras and how you use that. I know you talk about chakras in your business and in your book, but how do they play into the money mindset and how we show up?
So in the beginning of our conversation, I talked about how I wanted to find a way that we could tell what was energetically happening for us. Since we don't have the data on the outside, could we find a way to find the data inside? And that's when the chakras entered my work. And I started realizing that this ancient form of psychology that goes back thousands and thousands of years to India was created from a very intuitive place. It's not like you're going to find chakras on an x-ray machine. These are superimposed on, energetically. We see them because they represent energy centers in our body that have a lot to do with how we matured from age 0 to 25, which is interesting because I knew in my research, even before I brought the chakras in, that a lot of the stuff happening with us in money stories had to do with that maturation process. And I could see different themes depending on when problems had occurred in someone's life, how they were showing up in money. And so I could take the map of the chakras, the root chakra being, I am not safe. I don't feel safe. That would be the sort of scarcity belief. And the root chakra, prosperity belief is, I'm safe, I'm secure, I'm going to be okay. Each of the chakras have this symbolism. In the case of the root chakra, it's about having a steady stream of money coming in on a regular basis. If you don't have that, you're kind of bullshitting yourself about the fact that you're safe and secure. Like, yeah. I don't encourage that kind of like, just dream and everything's just going to come into your lap and it's all going to be perfect. Like, it's like, we are human beings. We rely on money for food and shelter. And it's okay to just understand that it's part of human nature to want to have a regular stream of income coming in. So each of the chakras represent a different aspect of our relationship with money. And by leaning in and learning about that framework, we become, instead of someone who says, I have a money problem, we're like, I have a throat chakra money problem. and it literally is like, that's the thing. That's the one that I'm struggling with. And the throat chakra is about trust and trusting ourselves and also trusting other people. And so sometimes, I was an investment advisor. Sometimes we don't trust ourselves. We go to an investment advisor and we say, hey, take care of my money. And we abdicate responsibility because we don't trust ourselves in someone else. And that's not such a good situation. Yeah. People have been taken to the cleaners for that, right? So that's like one example of how the model starts to show us, hey, I need to do some work on my relationship with money. And it gives us a map of what areas are fine and what areas might we want to spend some more time looking at.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me that like how you linked that together and like found those connections, because you're right. So much of like what's instilled in us, like by age 25, we're kind of in our ways because we grew up in our households, we've experienced a little bit, like we've done a little bit of like the adulthood, and those things carry on. And maybe this is like, it makes me think like we're more stubborn, right? Like once we hit that 25, like most of us are stuck in our ways, like we're used to our routine, we're in this pattern. And especially when it comes around money, like those money mindset pieces can be hard to shift once we've become accustomed to them. We're just used to it. And we're like, okay, this is how it is. This is what life's going to be like. I either have to, work hard, play hard. Like we have to this is how I find money. So it's like those little stories that are like embedded in us from those younger years. So I think it's interesting, and like how the chakras like come into it and like can tell a story for us almost, for like what's holding us back and what's holding us up.
Yeah, one of the exercises I did a few years ago, at an event I was speaking at, was divide the group. I told everybody what the chakras represented, and I kept it simple. I think I said, these are the three that we're going to break into groups on. And then we formed groups. So is this the problem you're dealing with, or is this the problem based on chakras? And then we got in groups. And it was really funny because I hadn't done it before and I wasn't sure if it was going to work. And I didn't have any tissue and I had to go to the bathroom and get rolls of toilet paper. And I was running around because people had never met each other before and people are like sobbing. And then I couldn't even break up the groups at the end. I was like, you guys got to come back. And they're like, no, these are my people. Like they understand me, because they were talking about root chakra stuff. And it was like so amazing. And it's good for me, a good reminder, because we are always playing with things in my business of like, how can I bring people together to have these deep, meaningful conversations? And I'll have to bring that one back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can see how like once you get into a group of other people who have been like stuck just like you are when it comes to money mindset and how you've been behaving and like the things that you've done and the things that you thought you were trying to do that were helping you but are probably like working against you during that process. And you're like, oh, like I like you said, like I'm with my people. Like these people totally get how I am. So I like when you're in that situation, especially like in that example, like you're focusing in, right, like on all the things that you guys have experienced together. How did they overcome like that shift that you were working with?
How did they overcome the challenge that they've been seeing and
Yeah.
experiencing in their life? Well, there is a process, and that's what I chronicle in the book. But in the beginning, it's like just awareness of what it is. So because that is so healing in and of itself. It's like, oh, this is where it's coming from. Like that's huge breakthrough. We
Yeah.
talked about that even in my introduction. These breakthroughs happen just by like, I get it now. And then that's empowering, because all of a sudden, let's say you do know, we talked about the root chakra. You're like, okay, I have some serious fears about everything falling apart tomorrow. And I'm not going to like tell myself I'm wrong for that. Like that came from my mom and it probably came from her mom. And this is one of my beliefs that I've had to struggle with, the root chakra.
Yeah.
So then all of a sudden you're like, well, someone who has a root chakra problem and feels like things like a few bad moves away from destitute poverty, it's kind of twisted. You're like, it's not true, but you feel like it's true. And like 50% of women in North America have said, this is one of my core fears. So this common one. So all of a sudden, maybe you realize that you're not going to feel safe unless you have a much bigger emergency savings account than the normal person would, like someone who doesn't have this risk. So for me, I like to have $100,000 in cash somewhere on hand any given time. Like that's my security blanket. Is that
Yeah.
rational? No. When COVID happened, did it make me feel better? Heck yeah. I'm self-employed. I run multiple businesses. Several of them sort of shut down, and we were like, oh, wait. And I was like, we're going to be fine. We can make this a couple of years. We're going to be okay. And that's how I roll. So it's not being in denial of the fear. It's not being crazy either. Like for me, that works because my husband and I invest in property and real estate, and we do want cash on hand because then we can invest and make moves that we want to make. But it's about finding the balance. It's like not being one extreme or the other. It's about finding the balance and then saying, does this help me feel good so that I can be my best self when I show up in the world? And then you're like, yep, that helps. And then you trust that.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you mentioned your husband too, because while you were talking right there, it was making me think of like my relationship with my husband. I love the security of having money in our savings account. Like if I can move money into savings, I'm like, yeah, it feels good. And my husband's the complete opposite. He's like, what can we buy with that money that's in the savings account? He's always looking to spend it because of how he was raised. Like he came from not having as much, and so now that he has money, he's like, we can like buy things for the kids, we can buy things for us. Like he's like, let's get it. Like, oh, you mentioned it, like here it is, like you want that doll, here's the doll. And I'm the opposite. I'm like, quit taking the money out of my savings account, like leave it in there. Like I like that security of knowing it's there for rainy days or for like travel or like bigger things. So it's interesting, like the dynamics, like of how we're raised and how we're brought up. And then like you put it into like a relationship with somebody else. And then there's like that battling of the head.
Totally. It's funny. You're reminding me, there's several couples who have actively, people I know have both gotten copies of the book and literally in the bed at night are both reading the book and talking about it, because the book is it becomes the person. It's very personalized to each reader,
Yeah.
but it allows these conversations to happen and be able to say, I have root chakra issues. And then the other person's like, I have heart chakra issues. And then all of a sudden they're talking about things that they've been fighting about because they couldn't understand why the other person was so different than they were. But now the book is like opening up these possibilities of communication and connection at a much deeper level. And I mean, that just warms my heart because I had no idea that was going to happen.
Yeah. You're like bridging the gap between so many partners right now because of the ability for them to name it, right? Like, I think that's the most important. We're able to name our story and our, like, where it's coming from and what it's rooted from, instead of just, you know, that bickering, like, no, I'm right, no, you're right, like fighting with each other, where you can like have a solid ground and say, this is where I'm coming from. And this is, I think, why I'm this way. And now I see why exactly you're your way. And like, let's talk about it now, instead of, you know, going to battle.
Yeah, totally. I mean, in my dream, I think it would be really cool to be able to work with those couples, you know, once they've read the book and they started to have these conversations, and then have them come in. We were talking about retreats in Sedona, but bring folks together in, you know, a handful of couples where, just like, it makes me so excited because there's so much potential. Because what is the number one cause of divorce? Money or some form of money, right? So I think the framework is like a darn good, you know, marriage counseling tool.
I think we're onto something here. We could definitely work with this, because you're right. Like it's an area that so many people struggle with. And when you give them the right tools and they have the right support and they know what questions to ask and they can see more than just like what they're seeing right now, it's like it opens their eyes to so much more.
Mm-hmm.
So I love this conversation, Leisa. Like, it's such a fun topic, and I love like how you show up for the world and how you break it down in ways that I haven't heard it broken down before, which I think is a beautiful thing, because there's a lot of people that talk money out there, right? And the way that you're doing it is such a beautiful way, where you're really connecting like your body, your soul, your mind, everything together to learn from that, so that you can move, you know, yourself forward, your business forward, your relationship with your spouse forward. Like, there's so much deepness and richness into what you're offering. Before we kind of get to the wrap up part, I'd love for you to tell us a tiny bit about your programs and your offerings, so that people understand a little bit more of how your business runs and like who you do call into your business, like who your people are.
Yeah, great question. So my ideal client is a 40-year-old woman who has kind of focused on developing her business, whether it be coaching or therapy or a hybrid of that, or some kind of expert status. That is the community that I found can use this work to make the biggest impact in their business. What I have done for the past 6 years is I have been business coaching. And that's how I got all the stories and all the experiences, because it's one thing for someone to just change the way they think about money, but it's also like, what do you do with it next? And I found that this work intertwines very nicely with that. The book is written to the regular consumer, but my work is, when I work one-on-one, most of the time it is for business owners. And so I have a program called I Prosper Business Advisory. It has been 6 months. We're moving it to 1 year. So that's coaching and helping businesses really step into the digital economy and, you know, be able to build a business that provides a steady stream of income, because obviously that's super important. And in the new year, there's a good chance I'm going to create a membership community that's more oriented around the book, which is spiritual understanding combined with this relationship with money, that hosts and, you know, the space for people to have these kinds of conversations. And I also have a free Facebook group that's based around the concepts in the book called Mindful Millionaire Community.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's definitely important to know where to go and find you, because people are going to definitely be intrigued. Like, wait a minute, what is going on with my money mindset? How do I get this put in check?
Yeah.
As we start to wrap up, I always ask all my guests a couple rapid fire questions, just for kind of fun, more for my own curiosity than anything else. But Do you have a morning routine? And if so, what is it?
So my morning routine has always included meditation. I'm kind of playing with it all the time, but I used to just stay in bed. And the goal was if I get out of bed, then I get distracted and I go to work or something. So stay in bed, meditate, and then do some yoga, and then onto the computer, breakfast, all that good stuff. I am a breakfast eater, but that's my morning routine. I like to get some body movement. I mean, that's my perfect situation. I get a lot of early morning meetings, and that's not actually the best for me.
Yeah, it does impact the day when we're able to start it. I call it like a slow morning where I'm able to, like, if I can get up before my kids are up and come downstairs and have like coffee and journal for a few minutes, like I call that like a huge win for the day, because most mornings it's like somebody's jumping on my bed and they're waking up and they're hungry and they need to get ready for school, and like it starts the day in such a different way than when we just can kind of do it slowly and on our terms.
Yes.
So I'm curious, who has been the biggest influence in your life? If you could like name one person that's like made a huge impact, who would you say and why?
Definitely my husband. We've been together since college, so 33, 34 years. He has inspired my, I think, transition. He's been supportive of all the changes that I've made over the years, and he's supported, the creation of my business. It hasn't always been easy. I was always the primary breadwinner for the family, and me leaving benefits and starting the company was not a pleasant. He's also self-employed in construction as well. And, that has not been an easy transition for him, because he was like, I like it when you have that regular amount of money coming in
Yeah.
and benefits and all of that. But he's been the most influential person by far in my life.
Yeah. And it does make an impact when both of you are self-employed, because it's really nice when there is that one person you're like, okay, we have the steady health insurance, or we have the steady income coming in. So it's impressive that you guys both chose to have that leap and that you both believed in each other to do it.
Yeah.
So, all right. I think you live in my happy spot, because I just want to go to Sedona so bad and check it out because it's on my bucket list. But what's your happy spot? Like when you need to recharge and reset, where do you go? What do you do? What does that look like?
Yeah. So right now we move back and forth between Sedona and Flagstaff. So my son could go to high school in Flagstaff. Well, now they're not open. So we're thinking about going back to Sedona full time versus kind of flip flopping. So Sedona is definitely my happy spot. Anywhere out on the Red Rocks, hiking, sitting, just soaking up this beautiful energy. It is a very, very, very magical place. And it has literally changed my life because it opened me up to my inner psychic abilities that I had not fully understood until we moved there, and they just sort of activated. And ever since, I don't lose them now when I go other places, but it's just that magical for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds amazing. And like we were talking before the show, even like Sedona's been on my bucket list for years, and I've been so close to it and I still haven't made it. So that's why we had mentioned like a retreat. I was like, hey, Lisa, let's have a retreat in Sedona.
Heck yeah.
So yeah, I can see how it just like sheds light on so many areas of your life when you live in a beautiful place. Like that's one of the beautiful things I love since we've moved to California is I feel like I'm an hour from the beach, an hour from the mountains, an hour from like the desert, because we go out in our toy hauler and the kids, my husband ride quads, and I'm a sand bunny. I don't really go out as much, but it's just so nice to kind of unplug and like relax and find like a place that feels magical for you.
Yes.
And my last question for you, and I know that I can't do it today, but if I was able to give you a ticket and send you anywhere in the world for you to travel, where would you go?
So the place that's on my bucket list right now has been Rome. I've been before, but I went when I was, 30 plus years ago, and it's been calling me, and I was planning on going this year. And yeah, so Rome just calls to me because I love going to places just where it smells different, it feels different. You get to just watch people and experience all of that. And Italy is one of those places.
Yeah, soon. One day soon, we'll be able to
Yeah.
travel wherever we want to go. Lisa, it's been so amazing having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here with me. tell people, where can they connect with you? Where's the best place for them to go?
So thank you so much for having me. This has been a beautiful conversation. And you can go to wealthclinic.com. And on the site, there's a way to take a chakra and money quiz. So that's a great place to get started. And you can also check out mindfulmillionairebook.com. And that's where you'll see like a trailer about the book and give you a little more information if you want to check that out.
Awesome. Well, Leisa, thank you so much for coming on. And we need to talk again soon. It's been so much fun.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, that's a wrap for episode 31. Have an amazing week, and I will see you guys all next week on the Attract and Stand Out podcast. Bye.